I'm actually for capitalism, okay? I don't want any misunderstanding, but I want it to work for everyone, or for more people than it's working for now, okay? Because we see, we hear, depending on which side of the political aisle you are, how well the economy is doing. Well, it's doing really well for rich people. That is undeniable. When it goes a little bit further down, I think it's a lot more nuanced than the talking points that you hear on CNN or Fox. Go ahead, Alexandra.
Oh, I think you're right, Peter. It's always more nuanced than the talking points we hear on Fox. But I mean, Adam Smith himself wasn't naive, and he recognized. He wrote in his Wealth of Nations about that free markets would produce inequality. He wrote, "For every rich man, there will be 500 poor men." Right. But for him, the universal opulence that free markets would produce was worth it, and we see that empirically, objectively, that capitalism has done a lot of good in reducing global poverty. The number of individuals who live on $1 a day has reduced by 80% in the last 3.5 decades, and so you can't argue with facts like that.
There's a common criticism, and I think it's an interesting characterization, is that there is socialism in America, and it's for the rich, and it's really everybody else has to go through the rigors of capitalism. There is something to that. Go ahead, in Indianapolis.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the most effective way of defending capitalism today is through the words of the father of capitalism himself, Adam Smith, who is an intellectual hero of mine. And Smith said over and over again in his famous book, the book that made him famous in his day, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, that any system, any economic system, free markets or otherwise, would only be as effective, as good, as the people who, as the virtue, as the morality of the people who lived under the system. And I think that's true today. In Theory of Moral Sentiments, Smith talks about the need for human empathy, the need for compassion, the need for sympathy. And I think that is one problem with the rise of inequality today, where it's increasingly the case that there are two Americas, where people in upper echelons of society have no idea how people in the lower echelons live and the struggles that they have. Okay. And I think that's one reason why we see socialism on the rise. Okay, and
we're going to go to a short break here. One thing I want to say here, the one good thing about having your own program, we get to talk about Adam Smith and other really smart people. I like that. Okay, after a short break, we'll continue our discussion on capitalism. Stay with RT. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing capitalism. Alexandria, one of the things that's, we've touched upon it already in this program, but, I think it's something we should be really worried about is the younger generation, their indebtedness and their prospects for the future. When you're laden with so much debt, you ended up living with your parents in your early 30s. You're not getting a job in the field that you study, which, that happens a lot. But when you study something with studies at the end of it, well, you should be, as a heads up, you're not going to do that, okay? And then being after university, getting a degree, you're in low-wage jobs. And that is, again, this appeal of socialism, because they see this it's so insurmountable that they're not going to do better than their parents. And that is vivid. That's very real. When you're living in the basement, that's really real. Go ahead, Alexandra.
I think you're right, Peter, that this issue of rising student debt and a dearth of well-paying jobs has contributed to mistrust in a free market system as being a system that works for everyone. I absolutely agree. But, I mean, as was mentioned by my fellow panelists just a few moments ago, objective measures of standard of living are up. I mean, we're living longer. We are more educated. A litany of these touchstones for general physical well-being and objective standards of living are up. Yet, I think what's important to keep in mind is that we are not just, physical beings. We're social beings. We're spiritual beings. We're emotional beings as well. And we do have this sort of crisis of meaning where, I mean, a few moments ago, Peter, you talked about the family. Like, how do we support the family? We see the family breaking down, the church breaking down, communities breaking down all across the country. And I think that people are displacing, like, these are the traditional foundations of where people derive their meaning from. And without those, people are looking to ideology. I think this describes the rise of socialism and tribalism and other radical ideologies as well. And you also mentioned a little while ago, Peter, Eastern Europe and your time there. And I think that's a really powerful illustration. There's a great book by a gentleman named Ernst Gellman called The Conditions of Liberty, where he talks about this struggle in the post-Soviet era, where in the West we were well-meaning and tried to airdrop these democratic and free market institutions on these post-Soviet countries, and they didn't work because there was this lack of community, this lack of social trust, this lack of civic bonds between individual citizens that have been so corroded by years of mistrust under communism. And so I think it's important, back to this Smithian point, that any system is only as strong and as individuals and individual communities as well. It's kind of a twist on that great Churchill line. Capitalism is the worst of all regimes except for all the others.
Many thanks to my guests in New York, Los Angeles, and in Indianapolis. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, crosstalk rules.